was a quote from the tape, and I said that hearing people say that. A few of the people were hit.
Another reason
It was no ground, basically. It was just nothing but people. So the boat, back when I first was starting to get up, the first thing I said is...
in Iraq and Syria, for a while, Syria was obviously having some troubles, some civil war, some civil unrest, and people wanted to be refugees. They wanted to come through and escape to Iraq, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia was not allowing it in. As a result, more and more people were on board. Eventually, Saudi Arabia was like, fine, come into our country. But then you had 40,000 people on the border in a desert area without any water, sanitation, without anything, and you have to find a way to house them, a way to make sure that there's some sort of normalcy, some sort of dignity for these people. So the UN and a bunch of other NGOs around the world come together and they provide resources. And one of those companies, one of those groups is ShelterBox. Now you might think, and normally what you would think is they provide shelter, hence the name ShelterBox. And sometimes they do. They have these tents, and I'll show you more when I go back out to the car. They provide these tents that are probably about 12 feet in diameter, and you can fit about 48 people inside. Very heavy duty tents.
48 people, really?
48.
I was going to say 48, man.
It's a big thing.
428.
Right, it is layer people.
Yeah, okay.
Right. In fact, the thing is that oftentimes it's more than 4 to 8 people that actually live in there, but the UN has a certain number per square footage that they have to abide by to give people a certain amount of dignity even in a disaster response. However, in reality, oftentimes a lot more people are using a specific tent. So, tents were one of the things they were provided from ShelterBox on the coast. But that wasn't even the biggest thing that related, that was one of the biggest issues. All right, I'm asking y'all a question. So I just describe the situation. What are some of the things that you would think of as being a concern with 40,000 people in the desert? What are some water, food, sanitation,
Toiletries?
Toiletries. These are all really big things.
Cooking utensils?
Cooking utensils.
Food in general.
Excuse me?
Food in general.
Food in general. So one of the things that happens in the desert, especially when you don't have a whole lot of infrastructure, is that you don't have any light. So what happens is you have all these families. You finally get people into a tent. You get this family into a tent. Maybe it's a mom with 3 kids. Now the kids have to go to the bathroom on the other side of the camp in the middle of the night. You don't have any light. So one of the things that ShelterBox provided to these folks was these solar lights which are drive through the car, which are a way for, and they're very lightweight, they're solar powered, they're solar charged, and now families not only can be safe when they're going to more fun places, but they also don't have to stay in a really dark tent all night long with their families not know where anything is. They can actually have some normalcy back in their lives. So while they're called ShelterBox, they do a lot more than just shelter. They provide. And you hang this and whatever, and you can, these last up to low light to last longer. Flashing lights if you need to help, or just have that as like a beacon, like where are you? There you go. So this is what it is.
Wow.
And there's the lights they provide. In ShelterBox. They go to a location and they don't just say, hey, you don't have any light. There you go. All right, I'm out.
Yeah.
What they do is they say, hey, what's going on? What do you need? Yes, it looks like you have a good sweater. Are you warm? Are you comfortable? What about the area? And they sit there and they work with the communities to figure out what they need. The hardest part to me is the situation in which they might also go to you in a different part of the community, you in a different part of the community, or maybe you're 10 miles away, or maybe you're 20 miles away. They talk to everybody before they start distributing stuff. And then with the limited resources, they say, out of all of these folks who I talk to, who's the most vulnerable? And they say, what do you need? And they provide those items to the folks who are most vulnerable. I think that's the hardest job to have on the planet, to look at somebody who does not have anything and then say to them,
What do you need?
I need to help them instead, right? I can't imagine what that feels like, especially because I just sat with you for a day and a half to learn everything about you, and now I can't help you. So, and that's part of the reason why I'm on this journey, is like, literally, the limitation of what they're able to do is limited by how many funds they have and resources they have to do it. Also, it's super important to have the right person to be able to know sanitary conditions, be able to pay complete attention to you and be empathetic without being distracted with everything else, and still make the right kind of decisions without being biased. You have to find the right people to be able to do that. So, super difficult. I'm going up to Echo, Oregon, and the days are about 100 degrees, and the nights are dropping down to like 40s and 50s over there. So, this is an example of one of the blankets they get. And it's felt on one side, and it's this on the other side. It's not, so in wet conditions, it may not always be the awesome best, but in situations in which you need to have additional warmth for folks, this is one of the things that they provide. So this is one of the blankets. And I think that they do have variations of these blankets. A hole in your roof, and you have a hole in the side of your house. And it's like mostly intact, but obviously you need some assistance. These little kits allow them to make really heavy-duty tarps. And I have one of the tarps in this just called heavy-duty. They're not the lightweight ones you get from like Home Depot. They're meant to like last the roof. So you can patch the roof, patch the walls, maybe add some separation to give some rooms inside of like this shelter that might be what's left of your shelter.
You have 40,000 people on the border
And yes, okay. In Saudi Arabia.
trying to get into Saudi Arabia.
Go ahead.
You take 40,000 kits or sacks or bags or with you?
Box sack bags.
Do these tents come in various sizes?
They do. This tent that they have that they show off most often, sorry it's so small. This tent is the one that is most often shown in pictures, and I think mostly distributed. It's nice because it has like a little awning in the front, so you have a little balcony, right? Little balcony out front. Yeah, there's a little porch, and there's a lot of room inside of there. And then thirdly, not only is the outer shell there, but there's an inner shell as well. So we also provide mosquito nets. I think this is here too. No, but they provide mosquito nets as well to locations like if Southern Africa, which has a high issue with malaria. If anything happens in that region, well, they're going to have to give out mosquito nets, which you might sleep in, you might protect yourself in when you're going out. But these have this inner shell, which once you have that in a tent, it's like, why would you have to go back? The floor is covered, it's ventilated, so you can open up additional vents inside if you need to. It's actually pretty impressive. So this larger tent is the one that I think is most important. Peru did not have the resources to help this small community in the middle of the jungle. They're just like, it's too far, we can't do this. Somehow ShelterBox knew of this group. I don't know whether we were informed or not, but ShelterBox was a group that went in, traveled down this long river with a bunch of resources. They had a gist of what the problems were, which was they didn't have anything. And so they loaded up with some of the box sack bags. And they traveled down the Amazon River for a few hours, and they got to this location. When they got there, it was just a couple hundred families, still a good amount of people, but it's not like hundreds of thousands of people. A couple hundred families. And their houses were pretty much devastated and destroyed. They were still trying to live in their houses, but in their houses, it was still flooded up to about here. They were still living in their houses. So they made like shelves so they could sleep inside their houses, so they could still have shelter. And so they would hop off the bed, hop in the water. If you lived in Egypt, go to sleep, whatever. And so that was the kind of situation they were in. And this is where ShelterBox would come in and say, and they cleared a land where there was dry, and they provided these tents, they provided pretty much everything. The pots and pans, the blankets, the cookware, the mosquito nets, the tents, all that stuff was given to that community. That's an example where they need everything. So what they needed in Turkey, I don't know to what extent. What they provided, maybe it was just tents, maybe it was just lights, but I have a feeling it was a little bit different, and each situation is going to be a little bit different. That's all. So that's an example of that collaboration. Like, you need to have that. But again, it sounds like Rotarians were involved kind of in the midst of all that, right? So another reason why I like ShelterBox. Good in the pots and pans thing real quick. In that Peruvian story, they gave them out tents, right? And you had everybody happy. And then you gave them out all these other resources, the shelter kits, which allowed them to pack some things, right? That made them happy. However, this is a very gender binary environment. So like ladies had a role, the men had a role, right? This is one of those older communities. It wasn't until they brought out pots and pans, that was the one time all the women in the town started cheering because they were so happy to have something to not only clean the water with, because now they can boil water, but provide food for the folks in the community. It was an example of not only like, oh, it's the interesting things that provide joy to a town, but also a reminder of like it's the simple things that help people through disaster. They wanted to provide food because that's how you show love. That's the way my mama shows love. That's the way a lot of folks show love is by cooking. And if they can't cook and provide food to those that they love, then that's a layer of their dignity lost in this whole disaster. But if they can, then it's just like, yeah, we lost everything, but at least I have this that I can do. And that's what conflict is what is considered a disaster. So yes. And oftentimes it involves refugees. So I think they're going to be focusing more on the refugee side than being like in a war-torn situation. I don't know. Hey, you want to live in this area where there's bombs going on. Let's give you a tent. I don't know if that's what it is. I could be wrong, but my hunch is that it usually involves I'm leaving this area because of a conflict, and I want to move somewhere else, and now I don't have shelter. I could be wrong.
The game is simple, but it's terrifying. He assigned me a privilege, and it landed on shelter. 114 million people in this world don't have it, but I do. Because of earthquakes, flooding, hurricanes, or conflicts. And now, Mr. Privilege is challenging me to see what life is like without it. I must enter a disaster simulator, a brutal test of what 114 million people experience every day. If I fail, I lose my privileges, and so do my loved ones. I've partnered with ShelterBox, the one organization that knows shelter better than anybody else. Because they've already helped out more than 2.5 million people in over 100 countries. For me, my family, and for all the millions who can't fight this battle alone, we will win. Mr. Privilege, if you can hear me, I'm coming for you.